Stellar Life, mission log number 263.
The longer that we deny things, that we pretend it's not happening, we don't have a foundation from which to make any decisions. So before even being necessarily ready to make a choice, it's important to be honest with yourself, call it what it is, and stop making excuses for that other person. There's a big difference between, joking with your friends like, oh, you're crazy, and somebody who is trying intentionally to undermine your ability to trust yourself. Because that's such a core element of our mental well-being, is our being in tune with our own intuition. And when you start to drive a wedge into somebody's core being, you really start to damage them.
Welcome to Stellar Life Podcast. Get inspired and live out loud. From love, freedom, and success to having it all. Here's your host, coach, speaker, and shining star, Orion.
Roger, you're looking good.
Hello and welcome to Stellar Life Podcast. This is your host, Orion. Today we're going to talk about a topic that is not easy to talk about, and people avoid talking about it because it's uncomfortable, and it's necessary to talk about it. 1 in 3 women in the US will experience domestic violence or sexual abuse at least once in her life. So this is not a rare occurrence. And especially in recent years, with all the lockdowns, some families live in close proximity to the person that inflicts either physical or emotional pain. I myself healed from an abusive relationship, and it was hard. I went to hell and back. But now looking back, being able to rise like the phoenix from my ashes, it was one of the greatest gifts I've ever given. It put me on a path of being a coach, a podcast host, and overall, I think, better human being, going and studying from the greatest teachers and luminaries in the world in all type of areas, especially self-development. So I have with me a wonderful therapist. Her name is Deborah Vinall. She's a doctor of psychology. She's a doctor of psychology, a licensed marriage and family therapist, and a certified Emdr and brain spotting practitioner. She specializes in helping individuals heal from traumatic experiences and painful relationship dynamics. Deborah is author of Gaslighting, a step-by-step recovery guide to heal from emotional abuse and build healthy relationships. If you are going through something in the moment and you feel like something's not right, there are too many red flags, you might want to listen to this episode and take in the information and take a step to set yourself free. If you know someone that you suspect something is not well with them in their relationship, then reach out and gently try to help or try to assist in any way, because people need you. I know when I went through my abusive relationship, I eventually had no one to talk to. It's a very isolating event to be in, especially because abusers tend to isolate their victims. I don't see myself as a victim. I see myself as a victor, as someone who lives the life of her dreams. At that point, though, I definitely felt like one. So if you know of someone that needs your help, then reach out. And if you need help, then you reach out for help. You can even contact me directly at orion@orionsmethod.com, and I can help you with any way I can. So I hope you will enjoy this episode. Deborah is incredible, and she brought tons of kind wisdom to this conversation. And now, without further ado, on to the show.
2, 1, 0.
Hey, Dr. Deborah, and welcome to Stellar Life Podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Before we begin, can you share a little bit about your passion and how did you become the expert that you are today? What made you go after that?
Well, I suppose I turned to psychology in my early 20s when I was doing a lot of volunteer work with youth organizations. And some of the young women that I worked with were just really struggling in ways that I quickly knew were way over my head to help as just a volunteer peer mentor kind of person. So I started diving into just taking some college courses here and there on adolescent psychology and crisis communication and things like that. And I just really loved it. It wasn't what I thought psychology was, which I thought was, basically manipulating people and trying to figure them out and tell them who they were. And that obviously never appealed to me. So when I realized how powerful it could be to really help people, then I got excited about diving into that and got all my degrees. So right now I work in my private practice, and I specialize in treating people who have a history of trauma. And I would say too, that relates to my own life. And I had different traumas that I went through as an adolescent, which is probably why I was doing the volunteering in the first place. And so now I specialize in trauma treatment, and I'm certified in both EMDR and brain spotting, which are just really powerful modalities for creating change and helping people become free of the things that they're held back by.
That's amazing. Dealing with people that have experienced trauma all day long, how does that affect you? Do you ever take your work home, or how do you shield yourself from their pain?
That's a good question. I think it was probably more challenging when I was more green, and you just kind of develop a way to do so. But what I've really found is that because this work is so powerful and effective, I know that the suffering is out there, whether or not I'm part of it. And if I can see somebody who's hurting, but help them move the needle on their healing journey, and I can see changes happen, which I do, that is just so powerful, and it's exciting to be a part of. So rather than just trying to turn my eyes away from the many, many kinds of suffering in the world, I know that I'm part of making a little bit of a difference for some people.
I'm sure you are. I'm sure you're going to make difference for somebody who's listening right now, because this is so common. I think 1 in 3 women in the States has or is or will be sexually or physically abused. So
yeah,
it's very common. People don't talk about it. It has nothing to do with how rich or poor you are, how
Absolutely.
well educated you are or not. There are some ladies that live in literally cages that are made out of gold and diamonds and Gucci, and they're suffering and they're lonely and they're being abused, basically. Can you tell me a little bit about your book and what made you write it?
Sure. My book is called Gaslighting, a step-by-step recovery guide to heal from emotional abuse and to build healthy relationships. And it was just released on May 4th of this year, 2021.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been really exciting to see that come to fruition. Gaslighting is a topic that, it's been defined for quite a long time, but has not been well known. It's not been part of the common vernacular until just the last several years, and due to perhaps certain political personalities and just other awareness, it's come more into discussion. But there's, I think, a lot of question as far as well, what is that? What does that mean? Is that part of my life? And so it seemed the time was right to really bring that conversation to the next level.
What is it?
Yeah. Sure. Well, gaslighting is a targeted form of manipulation and control and deception that's crafted to cause another person to doubt their own sense of reality. So that keeps the gaslighter in control and causes you to question your own perceptions, like what you see and hear, and your own memories. And it leaves you in a constant state of self-doubt, maybe even wondering if you're crazy. So that empowers the gaslighter, the person doing it, to control you and to control situations in ways that benefit themselves. So in short, basically, it's a form of lying for manipulation and control.
What kind of phrases do people use to gaslight?
Some really common ones are you're overreacting, you're hysterical, you're too emotional, you're crazy, or maybe just being told, oh, you're just being forgetful. A lot of dismissing of emotions and reactions.
I think we all do that to a certain extent. We all say, oh, you're crazy. We all say, oh, like those phrases, it sounds like we all said them at some point. So what's the difference between us saying it to somebody who does it on purpose constantly?
Yeah, well, I think that's a key word when you say constantly. I think there's a big difference between, joking with your friends, like, oh, you're crazy, and somebody who is trying intentionally to undermine your ability to trust yourself, because that's such a core element of our mental well-being, is our being in tune with our own intuition. And when you start to drive a wedge into somebody's core being, you really start to damage them. And so it's that intentionality and the consistency of it.
So how do I know if I gaslight someone? Like, because sometimes I say mean things to my husband. And sometimes he says mean things to me. And since we're together for a long time, I can say it can be consistent. You know, we fight, we love, we fight, we love, we love, we love, we love, we love, then we fight. How do we make sure we don't bring this yuckiness into our relationship?
Such a good question. And I think the very fact that you ask it, and you asked it so quickly, not as an add-on at the end of our conversation, shows that this isn't who you are. It's something that you want to avoid. So you are not somebody, I could tell already, who is looking to control other people in order to advance simply your own agenda all the time.
No, that's not me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No.
I mean, you wouldn't be doing this podcast for these purposes. But when you've got somebody who's really, often they're very narcissistic, they want their way no matter what. They want the attention and the spotlight on themselves. And every situation has to be manipulated to benefit their own goals, their own ends. That's what we really look at. There's probably times where we say something that there's a difference between a little white lie that we might throw out to protect somebody's feelings or because it's easier than dealing with the consequences. But that's not that overarching pattern of, I'm just going to create whatever completely crazy lie I want you to believe, and I'll keep reinforcing it until you think, well, nobody could lie that ostentatiously. I must be the crazy one.
I experienced gaslighting and abuse firsthand. I was involved with a guy. When we started dating, he put me on a pedestal. He was very handsome, very sexy, very articulate. He would make me feel so beautiful and special. And the abuse, when it starts, it doesn't start. It's not like all of a sudden they come at you and start putting you down. It's not. It's like putting a frog. When you put a frog in hot water, it will jump. But if you put it in water and you slowly turn on the heat, it can cook to death without even noticing. And that was the way with me, because it didn't start like that. It started so loving and beautiful and intense and sexy and yes. And
these people often love bomb you at the beginning. They overwhelm you and they're so charming. They're so good at crafting everything to seem like, wow, this person's amazing.
Yeah. And after a few months with that guy, first of all, he insulted every part of my body. I was fat, ugly. This was this and this was that. I don't want to get into the painful insults, but really everything that he could imagine, he told me that I am.
Mm-hmm. So that you don't feel like anybody else would want you. So you're more likely to stay with him and he's in control.
Oh my God. I was a shadow of myself. And then he isolated me from my family, from my friends, telling me stories that I believed because he was my whole world in those times. And I was madly in love with him. And he surely doesn't mean that really. He's just, he loves me, and he's probably right because he loves me. I was very naive. And it ended up when we had a fight one day and I ended up in a hospital because he was physical with me. I ran barefoot down the stairs, grabbed my phone, called the police, and that's how we broke up. But even after we broke up, he kept taunting me with crazy text messages 10 times a day. I love you. You suck. You're this, you're that.
Keeps you off balance, right?
Oh my God. Yes, mm-hmm. Yes. So can you get a little bit into the patterns of, I'm sure one of the listeners has or is experienced or experiencing something like that right now. So how can they know the signs? What happened with me, and it was like magic, like an angel came, because I started noticing that this is wrong. I mean, he did so many more things that were really awful, like yelling at a homeless person in the subway, or we wanted to cross the street and there was a dog there, a guy with a dog, and the dog was sitting, and he kicked the dog because it wasn't moving fast enough. And it was appalling. But I was at a place after this ended where I was so terrified. I would go down the street. I wouldn't look at people, and I was afraid that he was after me. I didn't even want to see my friends because I was afraid that he was going after me. Like the brainwash and the brain control was so severe that I was a shadow of myself. And I mean, I'll share more about my healing journey later, but what I understood is that there are similar patterns to abusers and red flags that we should notice.
Absolutely. And, as you tell us your story, and thank you so much for sharing that, you hit on so many of those very specific things that you see over and over in these types of people. Yeah. So just to hit on a few of the things you might see in a gaslighter, whether or not you're in a relationship, and I'll talk a little bit about what they're like in a relationship. You might see somebody who spends a lot of time exaggerating, lying, and misrepresenting the truth, even when it's not about you, right? So they're always the top of their class and they're always the biggest victim, one or the other, but it's very dramatic. They're always going to make harmful comparisons. They're going to undermine your accomplishments and they're going to upsell their own. So if you got an award for your podcast and you were with this person, they would probably be like, oh, well, it's just, a dumb little radio show or something like that. But did you hear about how I was promoted at work?
Yeah, I wanted to be an actress those times. And I started getting little roles in movies. And like after that relationship, I just stopped. I couldn't do it again, which was a gift. Now I'm like, I do coaching and I like what I do. I missed acting a little bit, but I don't miss going to auditions. But yeah.
Oh my goodness, I did that too in my early 20s for a little while.
Gosh, that's so difficult.
And I thought, oh, this is just about me. I need to move on.
Yeah, exactly what you said. Like I minimized any achievement. I just got a starring role in a little tiny independent movie, and yeah, it was nothing.
Because they don't want you to feel confident. Because if you do, you might not depend on them. Because underneath it all, there's a very well hidden insecurity and they don't want you to realize that they could do better and walk away. So you'll also notice in how they talk about others. And you mentioned that, like the way he was talking, well, maybe to the homeless person, but it's not just about you. This is going to be throughout their personality. They're always putting people down. They might be attaching dehumanizing nicknames to people, very negative about others, or even shaping the story about other people too. And then how they talk about you in front of others is another way that they'll also gaslight, another way that they'll also try to control you by, they may embarrass you with their insults.
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah, that too.
Yeah. And also misogynistic and racial slurs. You'll often find that. It's another way of dehumanizing people.
I'm Jewish. He called me, he's called me a fucking Jew. Like the person I love the most. I was like, what? Where is this coming from?
Right. Implicit in the idea that being Jewish is somehow beneath him.
Yeah.
Somehow not a good thing. Yeah. Horrible.
Yeah, it was. So let's go over the signs. We'll go intimate relationship and then we'll go broader into just business relationship or just relationships with anyone new.
Sure. Yeah. Just a couple more personality characteristics. You'll notice that they like to use intimidation with other people to get what they want, becoming bigger and dominating. They never take responsibility when something goes wrong. Like, you know what? I screwed that. I'm sorry. I'll do that better. We'll never hear that with them. They'll split people apart and triangulate them. They tend to be very entitled. They should always get what they want. And they'll never do anything out of generosity. Everything they give is
calculated.
There's a cost to it. Yeah, exactly. It's all curated to create what they want for themselves.
It's so cold. I'm like, wow.
Very cold.
I mean, narcissists, are they born like this? Do they become like this? Is this like some kind of a genetic disorder? Like, how do people become so cold?
It's hard for a healthy person to understand, isn't it? It's not genetic. Sadly, it tends to be a result of really pathological early childhood experiences with a complete lack of warmth and love and nurturance. And there tends to be an actual, like I mentioned, there's an insecurity underneath it all, but it's so well covered that most people would not see it. And they probably aren't even aware of it, or they would never admit it if they are. It's really quite tragic, but there's a point where, like you said, you can't stay in that relationship because you feel sorry for somebody. You have to protect yourself.
So how can one recognize the red flags? If they're like me, I was like head over heels in love. And when you're in love, it's so difficult to see the bad things. And even if you see the bad things, you're like, oh no, it's a fluke. Oh no, he woke up on the bedside, on the wrong side of the bed this morning, or there's something, like I remember I made so many excuses for him in my mind, convincing myself that this is normal.
Yeah, and your own value system that are positive values of being a forgiving and compassionate person are amplified, but toward the wrong person. You mentioned some of them when you described your experience, which is a really helpful reference point. The love bombing, just overwhelming you with affection at first, and then the process of devaluation, and then eventually sometimes discarding the person at the end. So that pattern will be there in your own relationship and perhaps with others. And then there comes the next part of trying to hoover you back in, trying to suck you back in, like you did with those constant text messages. But again, not just with a true, authentic apology of like, oh, I really messed this up. It's with that off-balancing effect, like you mentioned, of I love you so much. And maybe there's promises, it'll be better, or maybe even a proposal, like actually we'll get married this time. We'll get a bigger house. I'll take you shopping, whatever all those things are. But interspersed with this, nobody else would love you anyways. Don't forget how ugly you are. All these things that keep you feeling like, you know what, this is probably the best I'll ever do. So maybe I should. And, maybe he's going to change. So there's that hoovering off balancing effect. And they may frequently use ghosting, which I suppose we all do it sometimes when we don't have the courage to break up a relationship, or stonewalling, other manipulative tactics of just refusing to communicate with somebody. They'll surround themselves, and this is the one that you can kind of notice if you really get to know somebody in their total context. They surround themselves with people who enable them, people that will also see them as the golden boy, the poster child, the wonderful person, and kind of do their dirty work for them. So they'll back up their lies, even if they know they're not true. They'll back them up when they're putting you down. And they're the ones that really keep these behaviors, allow them to keep going.
Mm-hmm. I want to know, why was I attracted to somebody so manipulative and abusive?
Well, I'm going to go out on a limb since I don't know you at all. But let me just say, for a lot of people, the patterns that the people that we're attracted to in adulthood may replicate some patterns, perhaps to a more severe degree, but patterns that we've experienced growing up or in previous relationships. And what is familiar feels more comfortable to us. There's no cognitive dissonance. If we grew up feeling perhaps unloved, or maybe there was some abuse or some emotional neglect or something like that, that feels normal. And a truly wholesome, healthy relationship might feel so foreign initially that we don't even recognize it for what it is. Early childhood experiences can make us more vulnerable to falling into these kinds of relationships and thinking that perhaps this is the real deal, especially when you get that wonderful, warm feeling of that love bombing. It feels a true need, a real human need. And if we don't have a sense of, oh, I've seen this before, I see how toxic this gets, I see where this is problematic, then we might stay because the true need for connection and attachment is so strong that we overlook some of those red flags. So I don't know if that resonates with you, but I'm sure it does with some of your listeners.
Yeah. I think another why was I needed to go. I think my soul needed to go through that so I can be the person that I am today and help people the way I helped today, with this level of empathy and understanding that I did not have prior to that relationship. I was kind of selfish prior to that relationship. So now I'm a little less selfish.
It sounds like you took a really horrible time of your life, a really traumatic period, and made some gold from it.
I think I did. Yes. Yeah. And I want everyone that is experiencing something like that, or even just a little bit, I want them to turn it around. And how can one build up the courage? Because some people are more courageous than others, or their psychological makeup is different, or they have kids and it's super hard to get away when you have kids. So what are the first steps to breaking free from the cycle of abuse?
The first thing is to recognize and accept that it's happening, because the longer that we deny things, that we pretend it's not happening, we don't have a foundation from which to make any decisions. So before even being necessarily ready to make a choice, it's important to be honest with yourself, call it what it is, and stop making excuses for that other person.
Yeah, I think that step actually happened Yeah, I started to recognize that something was wrong. I was at Barnes & Noble's on the Upper East Side in Manhattan. And I was sitting there and I was reading about personality disorders. And I was trying to figure out what the freak is going on with me. And I got the book, Walking on Eggshells.
Oh, yes. That's a good one.
It's amazing. I forgot the author, but we're going to put it in the show notes.
But it talks about living with somebody or being in an intimate relationship with somebody with a personality disorder.
Right. And I started reading that and I was like, whoa, this is happening to me. Like there was an integration of the acceptance because somebody else it's almost like they were speaking for me. I was like, oh, yes, that's me. That's what's going on. Yes. And as I was sitting there, this guy came over and he just looked at me, looked at the book, looked at me again and said, if he ever becomes violent toward you, call the police.
Wow.
And the next morning, he was violent toward me. I remember what he said. He just said, grab your phone, run down the stairs and call the police. And that's exactly what I did.
I got chills. How beautiful that this complete stranger stopped to give you that little word of encouragement, took that risk that maybe you'd be offended or something.
I think it was an angel. I'm serious. Like this
so powerful.
This was really amazing synchronicity.
Yeah. You needed to hear that just then.
Yes, just then.
I'm so glad you took it in.
So the first thing is recognizing, and if somebody is listening right now, it's probably because they have something to do with this topic. Like this is an interest because of some reason. So the first step, like you said, is to recognize and accept what's going on. It's like, I think toxic relationships have an addictive feel to them. It's almost like an addiction. And like in addiction, the first step is to recognize that you are in it.
Yeah, there definitely is a lot of passion. There's a lot of highs and lows. The good times might feel great, but the bad times are just not worth it.
Oh, the good times were so beautiful.
Yeah. And that's the second part, is understanding that there's a cycle to it so that you're not sucked back in those good times, that honeymoon cycle, is recognizing, this is a cycle, which means after the roses and the makeup sex and everything, it's going to come back because it always does. So with that acceptance is also kind of self-educating a little bit, like you were doing there in the bookstore, so that you're prepared and you're strengthened against the temptation to, like you said, the addictive temptation to go back to that old pattern.
Yeah.
And then the next thing kind of follows from that naturally is allowing yourself a time to grieve, allowing yourself to mourn what you may have lost through that, the hopes and dreams of maybe this being a happily ever after kind of relationship, or perhaps just the years or the time that you've given to this person, maybe the friendships or other aspirations that you've given up because of the way that these people isolate you, allowing yourself just to feel the loss of it so that you can release that and not carry it with you forever.
Yeah.
And then moving into a time of learning to love yourself because you've not been properly loved for a while.
Yeah. So I did not let myself grieve. I was so disconnected from everyone. My family was abroad. I got disconnected from my friend that I was so close to because he was talking about them and kind of like pulling us apart and lots of scare tactics and all. So I was completely alone and completely isolated. And when I spent a night in the hospital, and when I was there was a volunteer from Savvy, and Savvy, it belongs to Mount Sinai. It is the Mount Sinai Sexual Assault and Violence Intervention Program. So she came to me and she gave me those flyers and told me, you can call us, you can consult. There was a volunteer there that was reaching out to help me. And in order to understand what was going on, I took their 3-day training. But it was so premature because I was not healed at all at that moment.
Yeah. Too much too soon.
Too much too soon. It helped me. It really helped me psychologically to understand, but I was not in any shape or form to volunteer. And I remember going a few times to the hospitals and it was hard every time. And then this one call at 3 a.m. in the middle of a snowstorm. And I'm going to the hospital and this lady who's been through the most horrific thing you can imagine, just lay there. And I was trying to talk to her, and she just looks at me like completely shocked and with like a blank stare. And it broke me. I could not do that. So I stopped doing it. I just couldn't do it anymore.
Just too triggering of what wasn't healed yet.
Yeah, it was too hard. So I don't suggest anyone doing this prematurely. And I'm forever grateful for that volunteer. This year I got the blessing to, like, I was able to donate to Mount Sinai, the program.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, so it was like coming full circle. Like, I'm in a strong place now. I can help even more.
Yeah. I think, the best we can give comes perhaps from, there may be an element of coming from our own pain and our own understanding, but not using service to heal ourselves, letting it come from a place of the wisdom that's come from the crystallized, the healed pain.
Mm-hmm.
But giving yourself permission to heal first, so we don't have this flight to health. We don't have to skip over the grief, the healing, the self-care, and pretend to be okay, because then the wounds are still there, the triggers still happen.
For me, like, the healing journey was, I just wanted to heal on so many levels. So first I took martial arts.
Oh, that's very empowering.
I took MMA and Aikido because I said nobody ever is going to lay his hand on me ever again. And then I took dance classes. I did yoga. I remember the mat in the yoga class was wet, not because of my sweat. I was just crying. I was doing yoga and crying. I was in the back. Nobody could see me.
There too.
It was a big class. Nobody saw me. And I was just like, tears are so helpful. And then I was watching funny movies, funny YouTube videos, cat videos, trying to every day do something.
Lift your spirit.
Yes.
You're describing such important steps in the healing process. We store trauma in our bodies. Everything we've been through, every trauma, we hold on to it physically, and doing physical things allows us to release it. Yoga helps to retrain the nervous system to a calmer space so that we're not as anxious and pent up. Doing something physical, like you said, with the MMA, that creates a strength and the sense of empowerment. Jogging, dancing, anything where you're moving your body and you're getting in touch with your body, because often when we're traumatized, we dissociate from it as a way to survive, and we sort of lose touch with ourselves. And that's what I was saying at the beginning, how a gaslighter kind of starts to wedge in and split you from yourself. So you're creating reintegration with yourself. You're getting to know yourself again, empower yourself, allow yourself to release so much pain on a really important, deep, visceral level. So I love that you were doing all those things. And then, like you said, allowing yourself to laugh, to find ways to uplift yourself as well is so important. Yeah.
And it wasn't like one and done. It took me about, 3 years to, I think, fully recover. I took lots of workshops. I did landmark education, where I actually I didn't write a letter. I called my ex and I asked for forgiveness and asked him to forgive me. And my ego was, are you kidding me? This abuser? I'm going to ask him for forgiveness? That's bullshit. Hell no. And I wasn't able to do it. And until I understood that this was me taking responsibility for being in this relationship. It was my choice to be in this relationship. It was my choice to ignore the red flags. It was my choice. I chose that person for a reason. My soul chose this person for a reason. It was my responsibility. And as soon as it's my responsibility and I take ownership, I'm not a victim anymore. And he doesn't have any more power on me.
It sounds like that was a really empowering process for you.
It was. Oh my God. It was one of the hardest things I've done in my life.
I bet.
But yeah, like all this, the self-help workshops and things that I did, that gave me strength as well. And I think it's so important to go on a journey of caring for yourself and understanding yourself and forgiving yourself. Can you tell me a little bit about self-love? How do we find more self-love?
How do we find more self-love?
And what is self-love to you?
Well, I think it starts with accepting yourself just as you are, that you don't have to be whatever standard you set up in your mind. that you're allowed to be messy and imperfect and broken, and you're still worthy. Finding that. Sometimes when it's hard to do, it can be helpful to look back on a time early in life where finding your, it sounds like almost cliche, but like your inner child. Can you picture yourself as, like a 3-year-old perhaps, just making a painting, and it's all messy and sloppy. Like we're so focused on being perfect. I can really get caught up on that myself. But imagine like finger painting at 3 years old, and you show that to your adult person, but maybe your adult person is actually you. And what does your adult person say? Like, ew, gross, you're so messy, go wash your hands. Maybe you got that, but what did you need? What would you say if you saw your 3-year-old niece or somebody that you love doing that? You should be like, wow, this is beautiful. Look at the colors. Tell me about, your process. Can you give that to your younger self, and then allow yourself to kind of grow with that? If your 3-year-old self was worthy, what about your 6-year-old? When did you stop being worthy? Maybe you never did.
That is really powerful. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
From that, maybe there's room for self-compassion when we make mistakes, when we're not perfect, when we say something awkward or mean. Like you said, sometimes you're mean to your husband, sometimes he's mean to you. Like we're all like that. Those times where we're stressed and anxious, or, we're in pain, and then we just snap at the person at the gas station or something. We've all got those times. And as much as we want to grow beyond that, can we also give ourselves compassion and say, I'll do better next time, but I'm not a horrible person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course.
And changing the way we talk to ourselves can be a big part of that as well. We're not, with our inner voice, one of that critical parent of like, you're such a that, you never do anything right. Or is it something of compassion? I didn't do that perfectly, but I'll do better.
Mm. Yes, we need more compassion, especially during, stressful time, like COVID time, where there is so many external stresses as is. We need to be more compassion to ourselves, because why not? Why live our life being unkind to ourselves? That leads to what? That brings our relationship, like how does that affect our relationships with everyone around us, right?
It brings nothing good into the world. And in fact, the more that we can be compassionate and loving toward ourselves, the more we're able to see it in other people. I used to think it was the other way around, but truly the more that we can be compassionate with ourselves, the more we recognize that same humanity is in everybody.
Nice. Tell me, this year, did you have to have more work because people are more messy? Or like how does this whole situation affected the psyche of people and their relationships?
Yeah, well, when everything shut down around March 13th, 2020, like most people, everybody canceled their therapy appointments. And I had a month of going, oh no, we have no income. What happens next? And then as we all kind of realized this is a new temporary normal, then, that started coming back. And at this point, I think myself and every therapist I know are quite just flooded with phone calls. And so that's a challenge, because there's so much need. I think it's an existential trauma to go through with such a long period of having, to varying degrees, but having a life-threatening existential threat to our way of being out there. And so that itself is traumatizing, but it can also bring so many more things up, whether that's spending too much time with a family that wasn't entirely healthy and now it's just you guys, or other life stressors, or what. But there is just an enormous increase in anxiety and depression around the world. And definitely a lot of people are reaching out for help, which is wonderful to see the people reaching out, that the stigma around therapy is going down as well. But it's definitely a problem to be addressed, with so many people hitting waiting lists when they call for help.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Wow. So thank you for this amazing service in the world. Can you share, I'm sure you have so many success stories about people that came a certain way and left as a new people or stepped into a new version of themselves. Can you share one of your favorite stories of recovery?
Oh, man. That's tricky because I have to be mindful of confidentiality, but it's just definitely a theme that is so wonderful to see. And people come in and they're stuck because of a trauma. Sometimes it's simple and sometimes it's complex. Like I've had people come in and there's something that was acute and terrible, but it was like a single incident event, like a one-time rape or a traumatic birth with a loss of a baby in the process, something that was terrible but not ongoing, like childhood abuse, that happens over a period of years. And, with these therapies that have been developed that are so powerful that I mentioned, like EMDR and brain spotting, I'll see somebody come in, we'll do the assessment, the background information, we'll do 1, maybe 2 sessions with EMDR brain spotting, and the negative thoughts change and the flashbacks, the intrusive memories drop away. And there's a sense of freedom and peace. And the loss of the baby is sure, there's still going to be that ache. No, it's never going to be roses that the rape occurred, but there's a freedom from it. It's integrated into somebody's life story and they're able to move forward. I remember one person who came in with an acute trauma of that sort, and it had led to all kinds of eating disorder, behavior, and struggles. And within weeks later, she was feeling the freedom to be able to let that go and to eat in a healthy way and nurture herself and take care of herself. So the healing really happens where we often have feelings about something that contradict with our thoughts. So we might say, with the example of a rape, we might feel like it's all my fault. I'm horrible. I'm dirty. I'm shameful. It's my fault. It's my fault. It's my fault. And no, in my mind, like, of course it wasn't my fault. I didn't want it. This person came, they attacked me, etc. And those two parts just don't connect. And so when we do these therapies like EMDR and brain spotting, where we use bilateral stimulation combined with a focused mindfulness that allows, instead of always pushing those traumatic memories away, allows us to focus on them. And then the bilateral stimulation connects the left and the right hemispheres of the mind, the logical and the emotional and the creative, so that those parts are able to speak to each other. I feel like I am watching a miracle happen. I'm just facilitating this process, but the person I'm sitting there with in their pain is undergoing the healing. They're doing the work. It's an amazing thing to see. It's an amazing thing I don't know what to say, to witness, to facilitate, to see that happen where somebody is able to find freedom.
Yeah, it sounds beautiful. I love how humble you are. It's not me. I just facilitated.
It really is what I experience as I'm in the room with people. And it's an honor to be there too, in somebody's most vulnerable and kind of sacred spaces, that they are willing to open that up and share that as they move toward healing. And I also want to just say, I was giving these very simple examples too, simple but horrible, but healing is also possible for people who have undergone years of abuse. I don't want to minimize that. I'm just saying that it does, the longer a problem's been happening, the more work it takes to heal, the more aspects there are to heal. And so I don't want to discourage anybody who's like, oh, well, my story is so much more complicated than that. Just be willing to invest in yourself and be patient with yourself, and just one day at a time, keep working toward that healing.
Can you share a bit about what is brain spotting? That sounds really cool. And what is EMDR, and how does this work together, and how does this affect people?
Okay, well, let's start with EMDR, because brain spotting is a more recent development, and it actually grew out of EMDR. EMDR it stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And it was developed in the late 80s by Francine Shapiro. And it came from the discovery that the story is she was walking under some shade trees, and so the light was kind of flashing, how it does when it is coming and going. And she noticed that the problem she was mulling over seemed to just kind of alleviate. And from that, she started experimenting with eye movements and found that as when she guided patients' eyes from left to right while they brought up the problem, it brought down the intensity of the emotions related to it. So the way it's been developed is that we identify the negative belief that we have associated with the experience, and also maybe the positive belief we'd like to have to replace it. So maybe instead of, it's all my fault, we might have like, I did the best I could and I survived, something more empowering. So also true, we don't have magical thinking, but a much healthier way to think about the traumatic experience. And we also bring up the feelings, even in the real time. We're not trying to push it away and skip over to healing. We're allowing ourselves to feel what we feel. And then the images of the experience, like perhaps there's a car accident, you're allowing yourself to picture what happened. and also noticing where you hold that stress in your body, because it's always held in the body somewhere. So while noticing all of these elements, the thoughts, the feelings, the somatic, the physical, the memories, we use a bilateral stimulation. So that can be the eye movement of tracking eyes back and forth, or it can be auditory. So we have sounds that can go from ear to ear in a headset, or tactile with either tapping opposite sides of the body. And we also have different kinds of tech that can make it easier, but none of the tech is required. Little buzzy things you hold in your hand that gets a little buzz from side to side. It's not like electrocuted, it's just like a tiny gentle buzz. So, and then we do that in little short sets where you like allow yourself to bring up the memories and all the thoughts and feelings, and then pause, reflect on what came up, and kind of go back and forth. And so what I see happen throughout this process is that the intensity might rise as you allow yourself to go back to this really difficult time. But as you stop pushing it away and allow yourself to just notice, and that's where the kind of the mindful aspect comes into it, the intensity starts to abate and the thoughts and feelings start to inform each other until just somehow naturally, organically, just as the body heals itself when we get a cut, the brain starts to heal itself, and more adaptive thoughts take the place of the negative thoughts, and the feelings respond in kind by settling down as well. And the physical tension also seems to go away. So that's EMDR. Brain spotting is similar, but what was it maybe the beginning of this century? There was an EMDR therapist called David Grand, and what he discovered while he was doing EMDR with a client, is that this one patient's eyes sort of seemed to jiggle at a certain spot as he was processing her trauma. And so he thought, I'm just going to experiment with that. And he sort of stayed at that spot for a while. And as he stayed in that one spot, this whole depth of information related to the topic just poured out, and it resolved much more quickly than it had been in previous sessions.
Wow.
Yeah. So what we speculate is that where our eyes are pointed, and there's like a million little specific dots in our field of vision, up, down, side to side, near and far, tie in neurologically to where different memories are stored. So he started experimenting with that and developed brain spotting. And so it keeps the bilateral stimulation through auditory. And from that, he developed not just the tones that EMDR uses that goes from ear to ear, but bilateral music. So we put on a headset and the music fades from one ear to another. And it tends to be really relaxing, soothing music, but providing that bilateral stimulation while also bringing up the memory, noticing the feelings, noticing where you feel it in your body. And it focuses a little bit more on the body and a little less on the thought aspect of things, the negative beliefs. Tends to stay a little bit longer in that mindful process of just noticing what comes up. But with this deep attunement in both of these therapies between the therapist and the client, of really just being there with them, sharing that pain, being there just even as a safe space, or to share what's come up or not in between times of going deeply into this mindful, meditative, reflective space. And again, the same kind of process tends to happen where people might become quite emotional, but we hold space for that. It's okay to cry, to let it all out. Maybe it's been bottled up for a long time. And the sense of resolution tends to emerge as that goes on.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Do you do your sessions via Zoom or just one-on-one?
Well, due to the pandemic, I've learned to adapt as well. So I do both now. Yeah, I was fortunate to be considered a healthcare worker. And so I was able to be vaccinated back in January. And that allowed me to safely open up my office again in February. And so I still have probably the majority are on Zoom due to preference or convenience or concerns. And then I have some that I'm seeing in my office now. So it's nice to be able to do both. There's something really powerful about being in person with somebody one-on-one.
Yes.
It's kind of an energetic connection. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's great that people from all over the world can connect with you and get help from you.
Well, I would say I'm only licensed in California. So we have to only see people who are in the same place where we hold our license.
Well, I guess if you're not in California, get the book.
And that was one of my, asked her, why did I write the book? That was one of my greatest motivations, was just thinking about, I love to help people break free from the things that hold them. But I can only see so many people in a week, right? There's only so much emotional capacity and so much time. But I thought, this will allow me to help so many more people than I ever could one-on-one. And I know a lot of people can't access therapy due to whatever reasons, maybe financial, or that's often the biggest barrier, different reasons. But this is something that you can get for a low price, and you can even hide it if you're in a situation where you don't want somebody to see what you're reading. So I hope that will help people who can't make their way into a therapy room.
Yes, and there are so many other amazing topics in the book, like setting boundaries and how to take a healthy action and how to get into healthy relationships and all that. So if you're listening, if you feel called to, please get the book and get help, because it is the biggest, it is a strength to ask for help and to be vulnerable with the right people. I got help, and now I can help others. And if you need help, please reach out. You can even email me. I can point you in the right direction, and you can call Dr. Deborah, or just find help, any help, even if it's looking for something on YouTube. If you need help, please seek help.
Even though worse situations can change, there's always hope.
Yes. That's good. On this beautiful note, happy note, what are your 3 top tips to living a stellar life?
To living a stellar life? Ooh, know yourself so that you can live authentically. That would be 1. Find the things and people that bring you joy, and let that be part of your balanced life. Not just always striving, but find the things that bring you joy. And surround yourself with healthy relationships, with people where they truly care about you, you truly care about them, and there's mutuality.
Amen.
I never really thought about your question, so maybe one day I'll come up with a better top 3, but those just popped to my mind right now.
I think that these were the best top 3 ones for now, for what anyone that is listening is needing to hear right now.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. And where can people find you, connect with you, and get your book?
Okay, you can connect with me at my website, which is tamarcounseling.com. So TAM as in Mary, AR, counseling.com, spelled the American way. And I think there's a link there to my book, but you can also look it up on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, Target, and Walmart. I'm not sure where else, but it seems like it's available most places that books are sold. So it's called Gaslighting, a step-by-step recovery guide to heal from emotional abuse and build healthy relationships, by Deborah Vinall.
Beautiful. Thank you, Dr. Deborah. Thank you so much. I appreciate you so much. And thank you for sharing everything that you shared with us today.
Thank you so much. It was lovely to connect with you. And thank you for sharing about your journey. I'm so glad to hear that you're in so much a better place than you once were.
Yes. And I think it's important that I will share my journey, because I think it can help. I think it's a part of my healing as well, because I feel like I'm healed, but it feels good to share. It feels empowering. And I think everyone that has been through something like that and found a way out should share their stories with the world and help lift other people.
Yeah.
And thank you, listeners. Remember to know yourself so you can live authentically. Find what brings you joy. Surround yourself with healthy relationships and live a stellar life. This is Orion. Till next time. Thank you for joining me on my mission to light people up and change lives around the world. I hope today's conversation inspires you to step up, go after the life of your dreams, and be who you want to be. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to go to stellarlifepodcast.com for show notes, transcripts, and other cool stuff. And please subscribe, review, and help spread the word by sharing us on Facebook and Twitter. Have a lovely day, and I'll catch you on the next episode.